All right, let's dive into the story of modern India. We're talking about more than 75 years of history for the world's largest democracy. It's an absolutely massive tale of transformation, of deep contradictions, and of more than 1 billion people forging their own path. It's a huge topic, so let's get right into it.
But first, just think about this for a second. Is a nation's history just a list of dates and events? Or is it something more personal, more complex? You see, the story can be told from the top down, leaders and governments, or from the ground up, through the eyes of everyday people. For this explainer, we're going to try and touch on all of it, because India's story isn't just one singular narrative. It's millions of them, all happening at once.
So our story really kicks off in August of 1947. After nearly 200 years of British rule, India is finally independent. Can you imagine the celebration, the sheer joy? But that incredible moment of freedom came with a horrific price tag. The entire subcontinent was literally torn in two, creating the new nations of India and Pakistan.
And the scale of what happened next, it's just mind-boggling. 15 million people. That's the largest forced migration in all of human history. As new borders were drawn on a map, entire communities suddenly found themselves on the wrong side. So millions of Hindus and Sikhs had to flee what was now Pakistan, and millions of Muslims fled India, leaving behind everything: their homes, their land, their entire lives.
This mass exodus just unleashed chaos. I mean, absolute mayhem. Neighbors who had lived peacefully side by side for centuries turned on each other. Refugee trains were attacked. An estimated 1 million people lost their lives in the violence. It was a trauma that left a deep, deep scar on the soul of both of these new countries.
And that's the real takeaway here. This wasn't just about drawing new lines on a map. It was a human catastrophe that fundamentally rewired the entire region. It created this legacy of bitterness and suspicion that, frankly, still casts a long shadow over the relationship between India and Pakistan to this very day.
Okay, so out of the ashes of all that horror and chaos, a brand new nation had to be built from scratch. And leading that charge was India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. He and his government faced this unbelievable task of stitching together a vast, incredibly diverse country into a single, working nation.
And what they set out to do was just so ambitious. I mean, look at this. First, they had to convince over 500 independent kingdoms and territories to actually join India. Then they had to write a constitution that established a secular democracy and a profoundly religious society. On top of that, they launched huge state-led projects to build an economy and created world-class universities. And a really clever move was reorganizing the states based on language, which helped give different cultural groups their own space within this giant new country.
So how are they going to pay for all this and build the economy? Well, the big idea was something called the 5-year plans. This was a model borrowed from the Soviet Union, where the government basically controlled the entire industrial economy. The thinking was, if we're going to catch up with the rest of the world, the state has to build the huge steel plants, dams, and factories itself to create a strong, self-reliant India.
So the next couple of decades, they were a real test for this young republic. India fought wars, dealt with all kinds of internal conflicts, and faced some pretty serious political crises. But at the same time, it also pulled off some incredible achievements that would really shape its destiny.
It was just a whirlwind of huge events. You have the Green Revolution in the late 60s, which was this massive agricultural overhaul that finally made India able to feed itself. A huge deal. Then in 71, India's military steps in to help create the new nation of Bangladesh, winning a major war against Pakistan. Just 3 years later, boom, India becomes a nuclear power. But then, the country's own democracy faced its greatest threat from within.
And that threat was called the emergency. Facing a political crisis, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi basically hit the pause button on democracy. For 21 months, civil rights were gone, the press was censored, elections were canceled, and political opponents were thrown in jail. It's still one of the most debated and controversial chapters in India's history, a real wake-up call about how fragile democracy can be.
Now, as we head into the 1990s, the drama shifts from politics to a different kind of crisis. This time, it's economic. But this crisis, as bad as it was, ended up sparking the single biggest, most important change in modern Indian history.
So, by 1991, all those decades of state-controlled planning had kinda run out of steam. The economy was stuck in a rut, and things got so bad that India was literally weeks away from going broke, not having enough foreign money to pay for essential imports.
With its back against the wall, the government had to make a choice. And they chose to rip up the old playbook and try something completely new.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Before 91, you had what was called the License Raj, a bureaucratic nightmare where you needed government permission for almost any business activity. It totally choked off innovation. But after 91, the government, led by Prime Minister Rao and his Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, just blew the doors open. They slashed regulations, sold off state companies, and for the first time really welcomed foreign investors. It was a complete 180.
And the results? Well, you can see it right here. It was absolutely explosive. The Indian economy, which had been plodding along for decades, just took off like a rocket. These reforms unleashed decades of incredible growth that pulled millions of people out of poverty and started plugging India into the global economy in a huge way.
And that economic blastoff really set the stage for the India we see today in the 21st century. It's a country that's emerged as a genuine global player, with new strengths, new confidence, and of course, a whole new set of complex challenges.
So here's the snapshot of India today. We're talking about one of the biggest economies on the planet, a world leader in software and IT, a nuclear power with a space program that's been to Mars, and it's still the most populous democracy on Earth. But, and this is a big but, that progress exists right alongside some serious, persistent problems. Flashes of religious tension, a massive gap between the rich and poor, and a really polarized political scene. And that right there, that duality, is the key to understanding India. Its story is one of incredible, undeniable progress, happening right next to massive, stubborn problems. It's a country that can send a mission to the moon while millions of its citizens still lack basic sanitation. And it's this mix of mind-blowing achievement and frustrating contradiction that makes India's journey so fascinating. So, from its traumatic birth in the fire partition to its rise as a global giant, India's journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. The big question now is, what's next? As over 1 billion people keep writing this story, what will the next chapter look like? Well, only time is going to tell.